If I'm having a conversation with a client around their struggles, how we're working together, I also drop in a lead magnet that resonates around that topic.
Meet Grant Fuellenbach, host of the B2B Podcast. He broke down his strategy to get 12 leads per month from his podcast.
It's one thing to get a Spotify report saying 55 people in Chicago listen to this episode, but if you can't turn that into a deliverable that you actually can get some meaningful data from, all you know is that 55 people in Chicago listen to an episode.
His process to run his show alone.
Having a tool that takes care of 88% of what I need it to, that is perfect for me.
And we kicked off with how he's been building and scaling sales team for more than 10 years.
The most common issues that I would say every business struggles with in some capacity, it's change management.
Without further ado, here's my conversation with Grant Fuellenbach. You launched your podcast Behind the Beat in October 2024. Today you are more than 50 episodes, if I'm correct. And you told me that it brings you around 12 leads every month. I'm very curious here about that. But before we dive into that, let's talk about why you started the podcast in the first place. What was behind your decision to launch your podcast?
Yeah, it's a great question. Ultimately, well, on a selfish note, people throughout my life have told me that I should be a radio host, just based off of the tonality of my voice, I guess. I think that kind of always stuck with me. And then when I started my first company, Drone Pros, this whole concept of podcasting was just starting to take off. I don't think even Joe Rogan had sold to Spotify yet or done that whole wave. I wanted to see if it was an organic channel of just telling stories or to be, to stay relevant and to also have really good conversations with people that were much smarter than me. That was ultimately the number one driver for it.
The reason why usually people start a podcast is most often to have conversation with people usually. Sometimes as well, there is especially for B2B podcast, there is this idea of generating leads, of bringing opportunities or networking. So it kind of makes sense. But I'm curious about your journey because you have a decade of experience in sales operation. So you've been successfully building, scaling high performance sales teams. I'm curious about, when companies come to you, what kind of problem do they need to solve? Because before being a podcast host, you have this role. So I'm very curious to know about why companies come to you.
Generally, it's always one of the most common issues that I would say every business struggles with in some capacity, and it's change management. It's getting your team aligned with best practice in whatever way that is, whether it's software, getting people to actually use your CRM or the software that you're paying for, getting your people to follow a workflow or a process that almost everyone else in the company has determined that is the best practice, that is the best workflow. And the end result, of course, specifically in sales, is to increase your revenues, increase your market share, increase your profitability of the business. And in order to do that, you really need a well-oiled machine. And usually that comes in the form of a sales team and a marketing team that essentially can have the right conversations, using the right tools at the right time, all of those things. So really what I come in and help is make sure that the right tools are set up in the right way, that everyone is following the same process, the right process, and that they're having the right types of conversations. And even more specifically to all of that data, all of that knowledge is shared internally and is almost iterated on in real time to the point where, you can see what types of conversations, what types of phrases are actually resonating with your audience, what language they're speaking.
This process that you have, it works only, is very specific to your niche, or you saw it working around several niches?
Yeah. So, I've worked in a lot of different industries, but all within tech. So all within, identifying a big problem where essentially integrations or technology can help overcome that issue. For the past decade, though, it's been in construction. So both commercial and residential construction. It's interesting. The problems are generally the same, even if you're working at a larger enterprise company or at a smaller 5-person home building or home remodeling company. The problems are still, again, all revolving around change management, just helping to identify what's motivating people to change and how do you actually maintain that momentum, maintain that motivation enough to overcome the setbacks, to overcome the flaws in adoption, if you will.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm really curious to know how do you proceed to make sure that they avoid these flaws and they have a sort of predictable profit. What's your process?
So I would say one of the most important things is you're never going to be able to avoid all of the issues or flaws. But the most important thing that you can do in any, even in a single owner operator, solopreneur capacity is to identify when a mistake is made and to document your journey. Because the worst thing that can happen is not just for a mistake to repeat itself, but for you or for anyone to not really learn from that opportunity. So that's one thing. That's probably the first thing that I really try and implement is a system of documenting the journey of anytime a new practice or even a new tool or a new process or a new framework or way of thinking is started, just turn on, your webcam and talk about it. And then put that into a repository that everyone can iterate or act on is incredibly valuable. But the process, though, it works heavily off of like practical AI. So lots of different, what I call like bridges. So essentially we're bridging a gap in a workflow. So whether that's just doing like a checklist of is a company accomplishing all of the best practices with their website or with their social media, with how they're consistently posting to social media, is their workflow consistent with what we found to be a best practice? And the same thing actually resonates across project management, client reputation and client management, team development and hiring. It's basically our workflow, the system I've put in place is really just a way of identifying gaps, saying, where's the manual or where's your time actually being inputted into a spreadsheet or something like that? And how can we optimize it? How can we, whether it's a custom application or a better integration or even just a better way of documenting that so that, or delegated, the process is really just helping to consistently and continuously identify gaps and then to have a system in place that helps businesses overcome those gaps.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how, because I've worked in companies before, and there was a company where there was a lot of documentation. How do you ensure that people actually consult this documentation?
So there's a few different ways I've seen success with it. I've even built out a system that was kind of like I forget the name of it, but it was essentially a karate belt. So when you start, the system had a pretty rough idea of like your skill sets, your certifications, your abilities, more or less, and your knowledge. Just like an online course, there's different chapters and quizzes and things that you need to accomplish in order to get your green belt and your blue belt. And, I actually kind of forgot the lineup of all the different colors, but it basically followed a linear trajectory of making sure that people were following this process. And there were, obviously it was gamified. So there was not just quizzes, but there was like fun interactive modules. There was even some like swag drops, some giveaways built in. And in this case, the one that I was building was actually for sales. So it was a lot of how do you overcome a certain objection? How do you start a conversation? How do you orient that conversation to own the conversation? And like, here's what I know so far. Here's what I would like to talk about. Does that sound good? And then go into a few questions. And then obviously like trying to wrap up with setting that next meeting in the meeting. But just, the whole thing was just kind of built off of small tips and tricks, but presented in a way that I guess a lot of salespeople just hadn't seen before. But I like that. I love this concept of like gamification. I think it's huge, especially for habit forming, for change management. And of course, just to make sure that it resonates with your audience too, whether you're in sales, marketing, or a civil engineer, making sure that the end goal stays the same. You're still trying to learn something or adapt to a new workflow and learn the new workflow. But the way that you get there, it doesn't have to be just a static Word doc that says, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. It can actually be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I like this idea because usually reading documentation is not the funniest thing to do. So I really like the idea of having some gamification into it. The way I hear it, to me, it sounds much more fun to learn about something that just the documentation that we all know. So yeah, really cool. I'm curious to hear about your podcast because as we said, you're a podcast host as well. You have your own show. I'm curious to know, who is it for first? Because we mentioned construction earlier. Who is it for? Who's your ideal listener?
Really, it's built for residential builders. So people who work, people who build our homes, essentially. The remodelers, the design builders, the contractors of the world. It's a show for them to hopefully not only hear other people's stories who are in the same space that they're in, but also just to understand, some of the challenges that go along with that and best practices, a new way of thinking, if you will. But yeah, that's essentially our audience is design builders who are over, I would say, generally 1.5 million in annual revenue. So it's more than likely not just them. They probably have a small team and some subcontractors that they trust.
Yeah. Is it identical to your ICP for your business, or is it a bit different?
No, it's exactly exactly this.
Exactly the same. Yeah, makes sense. I've looked back to your podcast. I went to the very early days of your podcast. I've noticed that in the early days, it was mostly you talking. There was no guest. On the most recent episode, I've started to notice some guests. So I'm curious to know, back then, what made you start the podcast without guests? And then recently, what made you start to invite guests on your podcast?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I started it, I didn't really have a strategy behind it. I had a rough idea of a why. I had a rough idea of why I wanted to start it, but I didn't have a really thought out process in terms of how can I make this succeed, or what does even, success with a podcast look like to me. I didn't have any goals or metrics or KPIs or anything around it. And so when it was just me talking about topics, I would do research and find applicable topics or applicable problems and discuss the research that I found around that. But there wasn't much strategy apart from that. And like you said, recently, I started bringing on more people because I really refined what I wanted to do with the podcast. I refined that it shouldn't just be me. It should be conversations with our clients, conversations with people who are active in the industry. And also, I'm having these conversations anyways, right? I have so many calls and conversations throughout the week with clients and potential clients and partners. And part of my brain just kind of clicked and said, why aren't these recorded? Why aren't these, there's gold nuggets and takeaways from all of these conversations. Why don't we just make them shareable?
Yeah, makes sense. I really like this idea of inviting potential clients, because to me, that's the easiest way to have any audience that fits your ICP. So your potential clients can hear stories from actual clients. They know they are the same profile, so they know they relate to what they can hear. But I'm very curious to know how you manage to get 12 leads every month for your podcast, because now we know that you hire the right people, let's say the right profile to your podcast, but how does it work? What strategy do you use to generate those leads?
Yeah. So this is, again, part of where that refined strategy comes in. Is one of the things I really wanted to get consistent about starting a few months ago was this idea of every 2 weeks creating something of value in the way of essentially a lead magnet. So a calculator, a guide, an ebook, something that would help my ICP with a problem that they're currently facing. And generally, the conversations I'm having with clients and potential clients also revolve around that one issue. And just talking about lead flow and website development and the presence and the importance of social presence. If I'm having a conversation with a client around that and their struggles and, how we're working together to overcome that, I also drop in a call to action and a lead magnet that resonates around that topic. So if somebody's listening and the video or the audio is resonating with them, I want them to have something that's kind of a homework assignment. It's kind of a takeaway. And that's actually been a big driver. That's actually where we've gotten the most amount of lead traffic, is having takeaways that you can actually track off of, because you can, it's one thing to get a Spotify or a Apple Music report saying, 55 people in Chicago listened to this episode. But if you can't turn that into a deliverable that you actually can get some meaningful data from, all you know is that 55 people in Chicago listened to an episode, not 3 people from that 55 are struggling or have an issue that hopefully your lead magnet or your deliverable is helping them with.
Now, if you've been promoting your podcast on LinkedIn, on newsletters, and you have no idea where your downloads come from, or even worse, you have no idea which episodes bring visits to your website, I invite you to try a tool that I've been building and testing myself for the past weeks. Because LinkedIn impressions or audio downloads doesn't tell me much about what my podcast does for my business, but clicks do. And that's why I'll be running a closed beta with 10 B2B podcast hosts. If this sounds like you, I invite you to click the link below. And now let's go back to my conversation with Grant. About your call to action, is it something that you say during the episode or something that is shared only in the show notes?
Yeah, I started adding it in about a third of the way through the episode, but it's the one that I drop in about a third of the way through the episode is actually a call to action to learn more as well as to subscribe. And then I kind of, drop a hint at, if you stay through to the end of the show, there's a key takeaway or a key value add that will help you overcome this issue, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then of course at the end of the show, in the final CTA, I actually have the main script, I guess, the main pitch for the CTA.
Yeah. What format is it's a document, it's a video usually, your lead magnet?
It's usually a PDF document if it's a guide of some kind, and then I essentially gate it. So it's behind a form. So similar to how ManyChat works, and you've probably seen them all over the place on Instagram, where it's like, hey, this is the tool I'm using to do boo 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 boo. If you want to have it for yourself, comment this word, and then they automatically direct message you. It's no different than that, essentially. Basically, then I can get a report of more information on not just who's listening, but who's actually engaging with that type of content. And I can follow up, appropriately.
I like that. Because, yeah, I've listened to a lot of podcasts that don't have any call to action. And so I find it really hard to get any leads if you don't tell people what to do next. So I find that really smart that you have always that call to action that tell them what to do, and then you have the gated form, so they have to actually leave information, and so that's how you get leads. So you always, is it your first lead magnet, or you tried other lead magnets before that didn't get the result that you expected?
Yeah, I actually didn't do anything like this before. I had a templated call to action that I would drop into the show notes. That was, essentially a link to the subscribe button. But I didn't have anything that was actually part of the show. I think, I can't remember, it might have been Alex Hormozy who was talking about this, just kind of his framework for an episode flow. And it just kind of clicked for me. It was like, oh, that makes perfect sense to try and add that into your workflow, where, you don't have to front load the episode with 8 minutes of sponsored ads. You can actually organically add it into the episode, so it really flows better. It's obviously a work in progress too. A lot of it is making sure that up until recently, I didn't have the right tools because I wasn't focused on it as a marketing channel. I wasn't using the right tools for shows. I think I was just, to be frank, half-assing it. Um, but, and the other part of it is just like adding in, making sure your workflow is dialed in. Or if you're delegating the task of editing a show and promoting it and making sure that it's dialed in, make sure that the person who's doing that is using kind of best practices around that, making sure that they're adding in the right call to actions, that they're giving you the data and the feedback that you need. Or if you're just doing it yourself, there's so many tools out now that incorporate AI and, to not only help you edit, but to make it sound clear. And then also just to drop in clips if you have that pre-recorded, 30-second call to action. That's like just a standard call to action to subscribe. And then maybe a more personalized one at the end. That's a call to action to take action on that lead magnet. For the longest time, I used Loom for kind of my daily driver of video recording. But I, at the beginning of the year, switched over to a tool called Tela. And that tool has been insanely helpful. So much more than Loom can do. Not only just for, recording my ugly mug on a screen, but also for video editing and making SOPs and just making content that is like intuitive, because I'm not a video editor or an audio engineer. So I need something that helps me work through a project, i.e. a show, but also not spend all day on it either.
Yeah.
Sorry for the
No, because I was about to ask you about if you either have an editor or if you edit everything yourself. From my understanding, you edit yourself. That's actually an important point because I'm active on LinkedIn for the most part. And I see you, I see your posts. I've seen you promoting your podcast there because obviously it's hard to grow a podcast solely on podcast platform. You need to distribute your podcast on platforms that can actually spread the word about your podcast. And so I'm curious to know about, your process, because you mentioned that you edit yourself. How does it work? The tool that you use, how many clips usually you edit so you can post them on LinkedIn? What's your process on that?
So one of the tools I also use, Tela is awesome for combining clips, right? For chapters of a show, for adding in that first call to action, the second call to action. There's actually another tool that I use, which is actually I use the free version. It's called Contrast, and it's actually designed as a webinar tool. So there's a lot of features in it that kind of compete with, Riverside, Zoom, things of that nature, but the UI UX is a lot more clean, a lot more modern, I think. And one of the really cool features that you get with Contrast is it will actually clip parts of your show for you for the correct channel on Facebook or Meta or, YouTube. And it will tell you essentially why it has recommend. And I think Descript actually can do that too.
Yeah.
But what's really nice about it is it says, hey, we recommend this clip. We think has an 85% virality rate for this reason. And so it kind of takes the guesswork out of it. Because personally, going back to my main point, like, I don't want to spend all day on one show because I don't like to put all of my eggs in that basket. Because, similar to a lot of people, I'm a one-man show over here, and I need to get a lot more things done in a day than just to have a really polished, beautiful podcast. And also, it's just not my passion. It's not something that I'm diving into the nitty-gritty on sound engineering. And so having a tool that takes care of 88% of what I need it to, where I'm also not charged an arm and a leg, is perfect for me.
Yeah. These tools are getting really, really good. How much time do you spend usually for one episode, like between the editing of the full episode and the short clips? Like usually with contrast, how much time does it take you?
45. I'm trying to get it down to 45 minutes. So that's from everything around creating the thumbnails to creating the description of the podcast, creating the artwork, creating the questionnaire, and then let's see, the interview itself is 40. So I would say overall it would take an hour and a half from start to finish. Essentially, my turnaround time is end of day 48 hours post recording, because I already had, like I said, Tella has a lot of capabilities around making the sound a lot clearer. I have a script and a template to follow around what questions to ask and the layout of the show, so I don't necessarily need to wing it or spend time thinking about what I'm going to ask next. As well as the guest, I hope, feels a lot more comfortable because they already know what's going to be talked about, what's going to be presented. Then post show, I'd share the raw file of the show. I share the edited one from Tella. I share the 3 clips that I pull from Contrast, and I think that's it. And then of course, I schedule it into the content calendar and make sure to tag the tags, as well as to link the call to action that person wanted.
Nice. Short and sweet. Really like that.
Yeah. That's definitely the goal, is to try and, my goal is ultimately to create a deliverable on the same quality scale as Rogan or any of the guys who are on Podmatch, who are just, you can tell, are on a professional level. My goal is to do that in an hour and a half by myself, using AI and different tools.
Yeah. Nice. And when it comes to goals, I'd say for your podcast, for your business, what are you excited for the future?
Yeah. I have a new momentum, a new motivation, specifically when it comes to, I think historically I've put too much pressure around podcasts. I put too much pressure around content in general, in the way that I was if I'm going to be on video, it's like acting. I have to create a script and read from the script and become a character that's not me. But recently, with this new aha moment, this new epiphany of, I'm already having conversations that are impactful to both, my clients and to me. Like this one. This is it's fun, it's casual, it's organic. Why was I putting pressure around this concept of a podcast when in reality, it's just idea sharing. It's just conversations I'm already having. And get over the fact of that, you have a camera or a webcam in front of you, because there's so many potential value adds that not only you can get from documenting your journey and getting insights from others, but also your audience. Your audience, more than likely they're not that dissimilar to you in your stage of your journey. And so if you're able to, provide value to them too, I can't think of a better win-win scenario.
Yeah, could not agree more about podcast, really. If someone wants to know more about you, about your work, what are the best places to find you?
Sure. So as far as I know, I'm the only Grant Fuellenbach on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me there. Or my company's name is Go First Consulting. So gofirstconsulting.com. You can check us out there if you're at all interested in the use of practical AI in construction. Or if you just want to check out the podcast to find an episode that resonates. The brand and the podcast name is Beyond the Bid. So beyondthebid.co is that website.
Yeah, really nice. I'll put the links in the show notes for sure. Just in case, if they want to, let's say if they heard a lot and they took notes from the conversation that we had, but they're not too sure where to start, because obviously you shared a lot of information. So if they feel like they're a bit stuck with all the notes that they noted, is there a resource or an episode you would suggest them to go for?
Yeah. I heard this quote yesterday on a different podcast, and that kind of resonated. And it's start before you're ready. You're never going to be ready for to create a Alex Hormozy or a professional level podcast. Start with where you're at today. So whether you're on a laptop, your phone, anything that has a camera on it, just turn that sucker on and, have a conversation. Whether you're solving a P&L problem, profit and loss, or you're teaching someone how to install an outlet, just document your journey, why you're there, what you're working on, how you thought of, like, how you are solving the issue, how you're thinking about the issue. People care. People are also struggling with that.
Beautiful. Grant, thank you for coming. It was a pleasure to talk with you today.
Pleasure was all mine. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for staying to the very end of this conversation with Grant. If you found value, I guess you did. And if you think another B2B podcast host could get value from this, please feel free to share the link with them. Send them the link to this episode. It would mean a lot to me. That's how I've been trying to grow this podcast, just by asking you to send the link to everyone you think that might be useful. So again, thank you very much. And I see you on the next one. Take care.